I asked you this question under the framing of your lowest moment in civilian life. What was the lowest moment during combat for you?
I remember it very clearly, actually. It wasn't like directly engaged in combat at the time because you don't really think about that shit when that's happening. But we were running a mission, and we had to stop in a FOB, a forward observation base, on the way to, I can't remember, we were either picking someone up or picking something up, or maybe even just stopping for a break. I can't remember the exact context of that. But I had to make use of myself for the time we were there, which is only going to be like an hour or two. And I walked to the back they have these burn pits everywhere. It's where you burn anything, honestly, paper, wood, shit, you throw it all in there. And there was this Marine back there taking pieces of paper and there's like boxes of the stuff on a pallet, and he was just like burning each piece of paper. And I didn't think much of it. I was like, hey, you want some help? And he's like, yeah. So I was like, I'm killing time. So I just helped him. And then eventually he was like, I gotta go do something. Do you mind still throwing this stuff in there? And I was like, no, go ahead, man. And this was an Intel Marine because his name tapes were blacked out. And eventually I was like, what am I burning? And I opened one of the envelopes, and it was like there were different versions of it, but I guess when like civilians are killed in a crossfire, they submit essentially what looked like a complaint. And it would say something along the lines of, my uncle and my niece were killed by Marines and insurgents, or whatever they called them. And I would like $500 or something. And it just struck me like, it removed me from the context of us versus them and made me really humanize just the internal populace that was caught in the middle of this, and at some point when you join, you can hide behind some idea of nationality. We're doing this for our nation or some shit. You don't really know what your nation's motives are. That's just some shit you're fed. And when you're in there dealing with that kind of stuff, none of that even makes sense anyway. Like, we're here doing what? And there are innocent lives that are being taken, meek people that are just crossing the street or gardening or whatever, Can you imagine planting flowers in your flower bed and then you get fucking snapped off by a round, because of two other opposing forces that you're not even involved in? And like, I got really, really frustrated and distraught. And it put me in a feeling of, what's the point of this? What am I doing? I mean, this is like my third tour at this point. And what have I been doing? And what is the point of even being alive? Like, just all these different emotions. And I got behind the pallet and I just kicked all the paperwork into the flames. And then I just sat there and watched it all burn. And that had been so much on a metaphorical level of what I was experiencing anyway, just watching everything burn. And like, it was that moment when I think I felt the most alone and lowest, because there was nothing to hide behind. There was unnecessary death and killing that was happening for a reason I didn't understand. And I was the one doing it. That was a tough moment.
You may not have an answer for this one, and it's okay if you don't. It's a complicated question in many senses. But if you could change one moment of your life, what would it be?
I've done more homework. I mean, kind of. You know, I am someone who's very grateful and appreciative of where I am now. So it's hard for me to say that I would disagree with the path. Now, if I had to like choose moments that I would change because of the pain they caused down the line, we'll try and compartmentalize it that way, right? And it kind of is. I would have. Yeah, I don't know. I would have done more homework. Like I had a rough upbringing, broken families. There was abuse from step parents, not from my actual parents, but my dad was largely absent. He's running around in the business world that was the 80s and 90s, and making all that money and all of that goes with that. Some people understand that, some won't. I'm dealing with abusive stepfathers, and my mom's Catholic, so she's struggling on her own level of understanding that the position we're in was horrible, but also believing divorcing is a sin, like really believing that. And the way I reacted to those moments, like I would skip school, I would do drugs, I would get into fights, I would whatever. I was in and out of boarding schools. At one point I was in and out of courtrooms and even jail. And it's like, if I had just been able to like mind my business and do my fucking homework and make good grades and go to college, maybe it all would have just gone away, And like so much of the path that I ended up taking, which was drugs and trouble and trying to ruin my life, before I enlisted in the Marine Corps, maybe that would have been an easier path and one that caused myself and my family less pain due to my actions. But again, it created the path I'm in now. It created the person I am. It created my understanding of my truth. It created my opportunity to be motivated to do something like the Marine Corps. So like I said, it's hard to say that there's things you would do differently. You have to put it in the context of what are things that you wish you didn't do that caused other people pain. I think is how I look at it, So I would have done more homework.
I've been with you during some pretty rough moments. The one that comes to mind specifically is a night out in Greensboro when I wanted to punch the punching thing, and one of the guys said he was a Marine.
Coast Guard. I think he said he's a Marine. Yeah.
But he wasn't actually. He was in the reserves, and it set you off, and you ended up going blind from the fight.
In many ways.
But I remember later that night, it being one of the first moments you kind of opened up to me about some of the weight and responsibility that you carry with people from your squads that died. Can you describe what it feels like to you in the moments that becomes, when it verges on unbearable for you, when that darkness is the closest to you? What does it actually feel like?
I recently experienced it, probably at its worst, so at least it's fresh in the memory. But it goes back to, I think the root is missing them because of what they represented, because it was brotherhood and honesty and truth and people that would sacrifice everything for you, and you would do the same. That was the agreement. And in a world where I struggle so much with its lack of integrity, it's frustrating to not be able to voice the betrayal that I feel, knowing what those guys sacrificed and what their beliefs were and what they loved. And watching what you perceive in the time as people just shitting on it. And that's not always fair, but that's what it feels like. That's what we're talking about. It's immensely enveloping. Like, I can feel these guys still in my life. Like, I can feel their presence as if you're sitting right now in the same room. Fuck, their pictures are right over there, you know. I can feel them watching out for me. I can feel them talking to me. And those moments when you can't express the betrayal that you're feeling in the situation that you're in, you just want them there all the much more. And like, no matter what I do, this battle for the fallen or any other thing I do to honor them, this conversation, they're not coming back. And sometimes you remember good things. You remember times you spent together, conversations, like they're still happening. Sometimes you remember the bad things, their deaths, the screaming, losing them. Sometimes the screaming doesn't stop, and it's all you can hear. And, you know, how I would deal with it is I would drink, and then you kind of encase yourself in your own cocoon of loneliness and hate and despair and anger and betrayal and sorrow, and you know, but the root is that you miss them. And they're not there to cover your six anymore. You're on your own. And you feel like some of the best parts of the world were taken away. And now you're left alone with the pieces of them. And then you have to become the living memorial of it. Because if you don't hold on to them, who will? So it's a very difficult and complex experience and emotion, to the point where you do lose to some degree a level of consciousness. You know, call them flashbacks, call them whatever you want. Sometimes you feel their love. That's a thing. Sometimes I can still feel them out there. Sometimes I feel like some of the luck I've had and success and against all odds has been some help from them. Like they're still watching my back, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, you may want to give me a sec on that one.
Mm-hmm. Take your time.
That way I can answer the next question a bit more objectively.
You don't need to be objective. I'm getting cramp in my trap. Like kind of just, yeah, this cord is just not quite long enough. If you could give yourself some advice, or it could even be like a tangible thing, if you were able to have a conversation with yourself or do something for yourself when you first came out, when you first were no longer an active Marine, any idea what that would be?
The anger is your shield. There's something deeper than that you need to focus on. And looking back, I mean, it's been 14 years now. You know, I would let them know that. Let them know that what you're feeling, what you think you feel, is not the root, it's not the real thing. It's deeper. It took me 14 years to figure that out.
Still trying to tell yourself that
Still
last
trying
week.
to figure it out, yeah. And you are an exceptional person. You're not a monster. And you have a lot of gifts and a lot of love to give. And you need to focus on that. Don't lean on the women, don't lean on the alcohol, don't lean on the anger. It's deeper than that. You know? Forgive yourself, be patient, and look deeper.
What about this script? And I had you read it right before we started this interview, which you've read it before. We've talked about it since its conception. But what about this resonates with you, and why do you think it's an important story to tell?
The script as a whole does a great job of explaining that sorrow and pain and rage and just things that are out of your control happen to everybody. Those differences are going to be based on the individual, what that means, but we all experience it. And it does a great job, at least you can attempt to take away from it, of having empathy towards that, towards anyone, you know, whatever fucking day they're going through. And then the part that is most identifiable, the part that's with the veteran, I remember those feelings very clearly, you know, feelings of applying for jobs, and they're like, they want some dumb shit, you know, like, you know, have you ever worked with Excel? And you're like, I fucking took a squad of Marines through a satellite Blue Force tracker in a combat zone for years on end, and it was hard, maybe not as hard as using fucking Excel, but yeah, it was hard, you know? And so there's like no gravity that's given to what we did over there, and mostly part of because people just don't understand what goes into it unless you've done it. But like, it's just the system's almost set up to make you fail despite everything you accomplish. And you know, it's like, no man, like, I didn't fucking rub elbows with that dude in the coffee room, but I have saved lives, you know? I have made very difficult decisions and shown things like leadership and integrity and work ethic in highly complicated situations that were fragile and essentially the Super Bowl of the fucking world. You know, so like, you know, but no, I guess I didn't go talk to the right guy in the coffee room at the time, you know, and it's just some bullshit. And that's when I talk about the truth of things, you know, what you have to deal with out here. And just the anger of it, of people not understanding, and also not being able to even voice that. You know, that's part of the frustration, and that's something that veteran goes through very clearly in that script, is he can't express correctly what he's feeling. He's just reacting in anger. He's defending himself when he doesn't really need to. It just goes back to me saying, I wish I could tell my old self, like, you are an exceptional person. Like, you're not a monster. You know, and he doesn't know that about himself reading that script, and he's going through that process. And the things we spoke on a day, the isolation that he experiences, you know, and even not allowing yourself to open up to constructive criticism, not being ready to, you know. That script just so poignantly hits on those subjects. And, you know, from a veteran standpoint, it's very accurate